Yes, everybody, welcome back to Talking Wolves. Welcome back to a new video on the channel where we're going to be talking about the signing of Jhon Arias to Wolverhampton Wanderers from Fluminense. A deal that should hopefully be announced early part of next week for Wolves to sign the forward from the Brazilian club. Be giving my thoughts, be giving you the info, how the move came about, and of course we'll have the expert insight later on in the video as well. As always, be sure to smash the like button down below and subscribe to the channel as we edge ever closer now to 20,000 subscribers, and let me know your thoughts in the comments section about this signing. But Jhon Arias, a player that Wolves have actually been previously linked with 2024. There were certain links with us and the 27-year-old. But this initial story now for this move came really sort of around the 9th of July. And it was GE Global over in Brazil who have been pretty much bang on throughout this transfer saga and given us so much insight and information on the deal. It said that Wolves had inquired and that an official proposal was expected, and then by the 10th of July, the following day, it was said that representatives between Wolves and the player had started. We had to wait a couple of days, but on Monday was really where we saw things heat up, and that was just 5 days ago, where local journalists here in the United Kingdom, John Percy and Liam Keane, had said that Wolves were very keen and hopefully looking to tie down a deal of around £15 million. Fabrizio Romano had given it the here we go. He said it was a package around €20 million. But then late on Monday evening, GE Global then reported again that Fluminense had actually rejected Wolves' original offer and they were expecting another offer on the following day. Now, it took a little while to see that. Probably by the end of play Tuesday, going into Wednesday, a few Wolves fans were a little bit agitated because we hadn't really had any fresh news about it. The only news really we were getting that Fluminense really wanted to be making more money out of this deal. I compared this deal previously to a little bit like the Max Kilman leaving Wolves to go to West Ham United. Of course, if you remember, at the time his former club had a sell-on fee. West Ham United didn't really want to go over a certain amount of money, and Wolves had to negotiate with Kilman's former club to try and get that sell-on fee down a little bit, just to appease all parties, because, you know, West Ham are happy with the fee, Wolves are happy with the fee, and for a club that, you know, don't pick up huge amounts of money every day, you know, they will be willing to help as and when, and this was the same here with Patriotas, his former club in Colombia. They were sort of happy to help because they understand that Fluminense, you know, they brought Jhon Arias for well under £1 million. They know Fluminense helped nurture him, making the player he is today. So, you know, they're happy to try and help them out where they can. And in the end, we found a breakthrough. It was very late Wednesday, early Thursday morning where we saw the fee agreed. And that was the fee of around €17 million plus around €5 million in performance-based add-ons. So an overall package from Wolves, it could get up to around €22 million. Fluminense will hold a 10% sell-on fee, and from that 17 million, the original 17 million, his former club in Colombia will get around €6 million of that fee. Again, a lot of us were on edge yesterday evening because it was announced that Jhon Arias was still expected to take part in Fluminense's game last night against Cruzeiro in Brazil. Up until about 10:30, which is when the teams were released, everyone was like, is he going to be in the team? Is he not? He was pictured getting off the team bus, and he did actually start the game, and he actually played 90 minutes throughout that game. Unfortunately, Fluminense lost 2-0, although you look at the match stats and they had the majority of the play. But at the end of the match, we did see the farewell. There were videos going up on the screens in the stadium, and you know, it shows a lot of support for a player who has given a lot to that football club, worked hard. I think in terms of the minutes, the player that played, I think he was second or third highest in 2024 for the amounts of minutes of football he's played. He's carried on that now as well because the Brazilian season starts early part of the year. Obviously, he's still been playing now, well into their league season, played all the Club World Cup matches, which we'll talk about as well. So he's played a lot of football, but very, you know, not very injury prone, which is great for Wolves. You know, a player that is powerful, is fit, and hopefully he'll be ready for the task that is the Premier League. The Club World Cup, which I just mentioned, is a competition where I think he caught the eye of a lot of people. Made a real decent account of himself, and so did Fluminense. To be fair, they got all the way to the semi-finals in that competition. In the end, in the group stage, a 0-0 draw against Dortmund, a 4-2 win over Ulsan, which Jhon Arias scored a beautiful free kick in that game. They then drew 0-0 to Mamelodi Sundowns. Into the quarterfinals, they beat Inter 2-0 and then beat Al Hilal 2-1 before losing 2-0 to Chelsea in the semi-final. Obviously, Chelsea went on to win the competition. From the 6 games, Jhon Arias got the man of the match, or I think it's the superior player of the match, FIFA were calling it. He won that award 3 times, which just showed how much he stood out throughout the tournament for Fluminense. Eventually, he was also named in the team of the tournament, and it shows, I mean, I've seen videos of Fluminense fans, I do mention this shortly as well, videos of Fluminense fans who just do not want to sell this guy. He's a huge part of the team. He actually wanted, ideally, to try and stick around till next week, because I think they've got 2 pretty crucial matches next week, and Wolves said, look, no, it's our pre-season, we need you here sooner rather than later. So he's expected to be finalising, signing all the bits and pieces today, which is Friday, and then by Monday he's going to be travelling across to Europe. It's thought that his medical may take place outside of the UK, just whilst I get the UK visa sorted, but hopefully by early part or middle part of next week, that signing is announced and confirmed. And fingers crossed for some of the people going to Stoke away, which is a week on Saturday, a week tomorrow, you may well see him play in that game for the first time in Old Gold. But let's jump over now to an insight on Jhon Arias. I spoke to Nathan from the Copper Club podcast to find out more about the player and what he could maybe bring to Wolverhampton Wanderers. So then, Nathan, thank you very much for jumping on Talking Wolves. Hopefully to hear some positive things about Jhon Arias. But how you been keeping, mate?
Yeah, very good. I think the Club World Cup has kept me busy. A lot more people intrigued within Brazilian football, which is great for the game, great for my business. And obviously that's why I'm here today to talk about Jhon Arias.
Yeah, I've said it a couple of times. I was pleasantly surprised, really, at the quality of some of the clubs outside of Europe during the Club World Cup. Obviously, some of the Brazilian teams got some great results. Even Al Hilal, the Saudi clubs as well. You know, they made a really good account of themselves. But I think obviously there'll be a few things to iron out. But overall, a decent tournament, I would say, and it's obviously put the spotlight on certain players, and one of those is Jhon Arias, who's strongly linked with a move to Wolves. As we speak right now, the move isn't done and completely sealed, but it looks like it's going that way. But what can you tell us, Nathan, about the player? What can Wolves fans expect? What sort of player is he?
He's a really technical player, really creative outlet. Probably the highlight of going to Brazil last year was to go and watch Jhon Arias live, and he delivered. He was one of the best players on the pitch when I went to go and see him. When I saw him live, it was in a cup game, so take it with a pinch of salt that he wasn't playing against a Serie A team at the time. But what a wonderful player, and I think a lot of people can get wrapped up in the fact that he's 27, so why hasn't he made the move beforehand? But this Fluminense side, up until the last maybe 12 months or so, was one of the best in Brazil. Won the Libertadores in 2023. Jhon Arias was a huge part of that. And he's probably the last gem left from that side who could take a move to Europe. He's been incredibly loyal, which I think is an attribute off the pitch, which is worth bringing up for Wolves fans, that he probably won't come to a club and move within 6 to 12 months if he's not happy. He will like to try and build there. Like, he's been at a really poor Fluminense side for the last 18 months, but he's been the heartbeat of that team. And that's because he works so well in the final third. Like, players in and around him haven't got the quality to stay in that league, really. Fluminense were almost relegated to Serie B last season, and Jhon Arias stuck by them, and he was probably one of the 2 or 3 players which kept them in that league. So incredibly technical, really strong. I think a lot of people may look at his height. There's always the question thrown to me when a player moves across from Brazil to the Premier League, being like, can he cope with the physicality of it, etc., etc. Well, this Club World Cup showed that it's nonsense. It's a nonsense question. And Jhon Arias is small, but he's mighty, and the way in which he can just hold players off the ball. But what I really like about Jhon Arias, and we'll probably dive a little bit more into his player profile throughout this chat, is the fact that if he drops deep, if he picks up the ball, he'll wait for a player to show their hand first, and he will know where to go. He doesn't just try and run at somebody, which is maybe a bit more of an old school winger. He's really calm and composed. And we saw that at the Club World Cup. Like, he stood out in Brazil for the last 18, 24 months. But against the likes of Inter Milan, Al Hilal, he was the best player on the pitch, which is why he got into the best 11 for the tournament as a whole. So, yes, he may be 27, and you rarely see a South American player jump to Europe for the first time at that age. But I think the Club World Cup and his performances within that tournament showed that he deserves his opportunity. And there's a few reasons why he stayed in South America, which I'm sure we'll get into. But Jhon Arias is a wonderful player, and I think the Wolves fit, if it happens, is looks really strong to me.
Yeah, I remember there were questions. The age factor is always interesting. I think, as you will probably know, in South America football, especially with younger Brazilian players, when it gets to sort of a certain age and where the clubs can maybe make the most money out of a certain player, I think that it will may change over time. I think in terms of the quality that, especially the top division in Brazil, some of the players are bringing over. Obviously, Neymar's come back, Memphis Depay. Um, Among many other players. So I think the quality of the league is getting better, definitely. But it's interesting. I think there was a situation with his wage currently, which I think surprised a lot of Wolves fans, how much some players in Brazil actually do get paid. You know, they're not on 5 or 10 grand a week. They're on decent wages even in Brazil. Um, but I think for Jhon Arias as well, Nathan, I think this is probably the right time for him to move, because I think in the next sort of 12 months or so, if he didn't move to Europe, he probably would, well, correct me if I'm wrong, he probably would struggle to get that move full stop for the rest of his career.
No, I agree. And he's probably been quite sensible because we're seeing now South American players moving across or signing pre deals at 17, 18, 19, moving across as soon
Yeah.
as they're showing a glimpse of promise, going to a club who want the next Neymar, for example. Their player doesn't turn out to be that good. They get shipped back to Brazil and then they're just deemed as not good enough. Where Jhon Arias obviously
Yeah.
has been at Fluminense for quite some time now. He was part of the 2023 Libertadores winning team under Fernando Diniz, and that team was just wonderful to watch and be part of. And it was only when Fernando Diniz left over the next 6 to 8 months after winning that title that key players did start to leave. And I fully expected Jhon Arias to jump ship as well. But as I've already mentioned, he had huge loyalty to Fluminense, loved living in Brazil, recently had the birth of his daughter. So he had an unreal Copa America as well. Like, let's not forget that. He performed very well at the Club World Cup. But rewind 12, 18 months ago, he was amazing at the Copa America. And I was very surprised he didn't make the move then. Well, you're probably getting a few clubs
Mm.
going, I won't look at anyone past the age of 25. I hope the Club World Cup has changed that mentality because we saw the Brazilian teams go toe to toe with Europe's best. So maybe that's going to give clubs a different direction moving forward. But I think, look, he's a regular in the Colombian side. So he's living in Rio de Janeiro. He was at a team who just won the Libertadores on a good wage. His daughter and his family were settled there. It was a question that Andre had to ask himself because his wife was pregnant, or his partner was pregnant at the time when he moved to Wolves. So that's why
Mm.
he was unsure about moving to the Premier League with either Liverpool, Fulham, whatever it was. So there's loads of factors off the pitch which will influence a player even wanting to come across to the Premier League, which is why a deal hasn't happened just yet. It takes time. But I think the loyalty he showed to Fluminense has been amazing. He's put a lot of respect and put his family first. But it's come to a point where I don't think he can take Fluminense any further. They're going through a huge transitional period. And the Club World Cup maybe showed, do you know what, I can do it against the very best. So why don't I take that now whilst I'm in my peak? And I will say that because I think Jhon Arias is in his peak at the moment. Over the next 1, 2, 3 years, if he develops and goes across to the Premier League and performs as he has been doing, I think it'll be perfect timing for him. Like so many clubs, as I said at the start of this little rant, take a plunge too early on a player, don't know what to do with them. They're still finding their feet and it doesn't work out. Where with Jhon Arias, you know what you will get. So I think we've already seen it now. Copa America, Club World Cup, that he can perform outside of Brazil. And he's definitely worth taking a chance on.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there, because I think as Wolves fans, we sort of experienced both sides of that. I think, we've had the pleasure of, or still got the pleasure of, João Gomez and Andre. We've had Mateus Cunha, although he took a slightly different roadmap to those players. Spent a lot of time in Europe before joining Wolves. And then we've got Pedro Lima, who I was hoping we'd see a little bit more of last year, but his game time has been a little bit limited. Hopefully next year or this coming season, it improves a lot. But I think even with Arias, I think Wolves fans probably won't want to hear it, but I think Andre and João Gomez have now made their mark on English football, and I have no doubt in the next 12 to 18 months there will probably be bigger teams than Wolves looking at them and maybe signing them. We've seen with Andre actually already this summer, Juventus. And I think with Arias, he's still got enough years left in the tank. Like you said, he's in his prime now. If he has a good year to 2 years at Wolves, there's every chance he's still got one more big move in him in Europe. But if he was still performing at a top level in Brazil at the age of 29, 30, I don't think many teams are going to take the punt on him. So that's why I think now is probably the right sort of time for him to come across to Europe. In terms of numbers, Nathan, I think when people don't know a hell of a lot about a player, they will look at his numbers, and his goal numbers probably aren't as high as, we would class his as Mateus Cunha's replacement. His goal numbers probably aren't as high as some Wolves fans would want. I think his assist numbers are good enough. But other than the sort of goal contributions, in your opinion, how is Jhon Arias going to influence football matches for Wolves?
It's always an interesting one. People jump straight to Wikipedia, for example, and like anyone who's in the final
Yeah.
third will be like, "Where's his goals? Where's his output?" But I've hopefully given a little bit of context already, but Fluminense have been a sinking ship for the
Mm-hmm.
last 18 months. Like they nearly went to the Club World Cup as a Serie B side. They only stayed up on the last day of the season, which is wild for such a big club. Like they've been in a transitional period where they've lost key players. Obviously, Andre had moved to Wolves. Jhon Arias moved to Shakhtar, one of their main strikers. So if you start picking away their best players, it puts a lot more pressure on players like Jhon Arias. So what I would say to Wolves fans or any football fans worried about these players coming across, actually look at what else he can do on the pitch. He's so good in the final third in terms of collecting the ball and taking it into the space, and sometimes is the assist before the assist. He's good at just running up the pitch, winning fouls, relieving that pressure, and being able to just get his team higher up the pitch into more dangerous positions. Fluminense have been a terrible side, a really bad side for so long now. So you can't expect a right winger, for example, to have incredibly high output. The season he won the
Mm-hmm.
Libertadores, and even the season before, 2022, 2023, his stats were fantastic because he had players around him who were at his level. He doesn't have that anymore, but even though he only scored a handful of goals last season, they were vital for keeping Fluminense in the league. And then obviously we saw a little bit of a taste of what he can produce with that moment of magic against Alton in the Club World Cup. Like that free kick was ridiculous, but that's what he's capable of every now and again. So he has that in his locker. He's quite old school. He's not afraid to shoot from range as well. Sometimes he can probably improve his judgment there. But it's also quite refreshing to
Yeah.
see somebody take a snapshot because the Premier League seems to be so orchestrated now. So it's quite good to maybe throw in a player like this who will spring a surprise for other defences. So for Wolves fans who are worried about his output, don't be. The calendar in Brazil can be unforgiving as well. So if he's been playing in a side almost destined to drop last year, they've greatly improved over the last 6 months, but they've got a new manager in. But the Brazilian calendar can be playing every 3 or 4 days for 7, 8, 9, 10 months straight across multiple competitions,
Yeah.
lots of travel, Sudamericana, Libertadores, for example. So I wouldn't get hung up on that too much. It's a similar case with Iger Jesus going to Nottingham Forest. It's all about actually watching the player, what they can produce away from the goals and how they contribute in the final third. And there's no, just because his numbers haven't been that impressive, maybe over the last 12 months, I'm saying that I think that he's, and this is my opinion, but I think he's been the best player in the league in the final third over the last 12, 18 months. So I wouldn't necessarily get too caught up on his
Mm.
numbers.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about like his consistency as a player. He's been up there with one of the best players in Brazil over the last number of years, really, and no surprise that obviously on social media, Fluminense fans are pretty upset about this transfer. I saw a TikTok weirdly earlier on today, and there was somebody asking, I think it was at the Club World Cup, asking Fluminense fans which player must stay at the club, and they all said Jhon Arias. So I think that just shows, how much of an influence he has on their team. Are you? Well, suppose Nathan, it's no surprise that they're upset with this transfer. I mean, when you lose your best player or you're about to lose your best player, you're not going to be happy. But I think the fee as well is what they're upset about possibly. In your opinion, I mean, in Brazilian football, do you think this is the right sort of fee? Do you think Wolves are getting a steal, or is it a good move for all parties? What's your opinion on that?
As a neutral to the situation, I think it is a good fee. I think it's around 20 million, so 25 million euros plus add-ons,
Yeah,
etc.
around
So
that.
in
Yeah,
around
yeah.
20 million. I think that's obviously snuck up maybe 15-20% because of his performances at the Club World Cup. But then that extra 3, 4, 5 million is giving you reassurance that he can play against the very best. Because if you got him for 15
Yeah,
million, for
yeah.
example, and not seen him out the way in which he performed against Dortmund, Inter Milan, etc., then it probably looks more like a calculated risk. But the way in which he did
Hmm.
perform and got into the best 11 at the Club World Cup, you'd rather pay the extra 5 million after that to guarantee the sort of player you're
Hmm.
getting. Fluminense fans are obviously going to be distraught. He's their best player by far. They've improved massively this season under their new coach, but without him, I'm worried where they go. So they're naturally going to want to get as much money as possible because they will need to rebuild. So yeah, without saying the same old there, I think it's Fluminense going to probably
Yeah.
press the panic button a little bit in terms of if they lose him, what do they do? But then from Wolves fans, obviously that's music to their ears because they're going to be getting a star from Brazil's league for over the last 2+ seasons. So yeah, it's a good fee, I think, if you break it down and actually analyze it a little bit closer.
Yeah, and of course, if with him coming to Wolves as Andre, who you've mentioned earlier on, he's played before, Jason Mascara, who would have played at an international level as well, and other people in and around that team that have been, played in South America, played in the Brazilian leagues as well. Do you think, and I would hope at this age that he sort of comes in and fits in straight away, but Nathan, in your opinion, do you think Jhon Arias will be a success in the Premier League?
I do. I always say it would take time for players to adapt. He's had quite a long campaign already than Club World Cup, so his
Yeah.
preseason may be slightly shorter than the rest, but maybe that would be a good thing for him off the pitch to find his feet. And I really like what Wolves are doing. They're building a really nice South American contingency. I actually think they're the best in the Premier League for doing it. I think they've outpassed
Hmm.
Brighton. Seems to have moved on. I do think they're outperforming Nottingham Forest in that particular market as well. I really like how brave Wolves are being to. I know it sounds silly, but being brave for Wolves to sign a 27-year-old, not many people in the Premier League or teams would be looking at that. And I think that they may feel like they
Yeah.
missed an opportunity. And I think I shouted from the rooftops over and over again about Andre. I was just like, I don't understand why nobody's taken an opportunity on him. So fair play to Wolves for doing that.
Mm.
And fair play to Wolves again to go and get a player who has a relationship with Andre already, which I think will help him out on the pitch. You've already listed the other players. So there's already 4, 5
Yeah.
South Americans there. So that massively helps. And it's all about getting it right off the pitch for it to work on the pitch. So give him time. But I think we will start to see, as we have done already at the Club World Cup, if he finds his feet and settles in at Wolves, I think it's the perfect club for him to go to in the Premier League.
And very quickly, just in terms of sort of positions, if Vitor Pereira sticks with how he played last season in that front three, obviously got the number 9 and almost 2 number 10s, sort of inside forward type players in behind the striker. I would assume Jhon Arias would play in one of those. Do you think he'd probably better off the left or off the right?
Always on the right. That's where he's done his best work for
Okay.
Fluminense. He's been put on the left quite a lot for Colombia. Maybe I think that's
Hmm.
down to competition, but for Fluminense, you only have to look at his heat maps over the last 5 years, and he does all his work best on the right, but can comfortably dribble into the middle. Loves to take a player on when he can. So it'd be interesting to see. I don't know if he's going to be the Cunha replacement. I know that's probably going to be the headline or what Wolves fans
I
will
think it'll be
want.
hard, like for like, to replace that.
It's
Yeah.
harsh,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because that's putting a lot of pressure on him. But he does most of his best work down that right hand side. So look, Pereira may look to maybe adapt his formation at times if Jhon Arias comes in and he
Mhm.
likes what he's seen in training. I'm not 100% sure. You're obviously a lot closer to Wolves than I am. But yeah, on the right hand side is where Jhon Arias does most of his work. But as he's shown for Colombia, he is versatile and he's not one to moan about where he's playing across that final third. So you're going to get a very mature player, and I think that counts for a lot as well.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thank you, Nathan. Thank you very much for the insight on Jhon Arias. Where can people find you and your content if they wish?
Yeah, if people want to know more about South American football, I do host my own podcast, The Copper Club, which is across Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. But if you don't want to hear my voice and you just want to hear me type, it's at Nathan Joys1 across Twitter.
Brilliant. I'll make sure I leave those in the description, Nathan. Thank you very much, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Cheers. Thank you, Dave.
So big thanks to Nathan. I'll make sure I leave a link to him and the Copper Club podcast in the description down below if you want to check out any more of his stuff. And as always, guys, that is a video all about Jhon Arias. Thank you very much for watching. As always, be sure to hit the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And let me know your thoughts on the signing of the 27-year-old in the comment section down below. But until next time, guys, look after yourselves. And I'll see you on the next one.